Porsche knows how to build a race car. Like they really, really do. I mean, to say, you take a GT2 and put race dampers, race control arms, race brakes on the car, and all this composite bodywork, you think like that's a race car. No, check out the GT3R. That's a piece of mechanical wizardry. Like they are just, at 500, 550 horsepower, they will smoke 1,000 horsepower build, off of a street car.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. I'm Sam Moores, and with me today I have Joey Seeley. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Can you tell the listeners a sort of little short summary of who you are and what you do?
I'm Joey Seeley, owner of Emotion Engineering. We specialize in special interest cars, some race cars. That is my background. I used to race in the American Le Mans series and over at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. That endurance racing is the background, but now because development is harder to do in racing, and I really enjoy the development, we build very, very special cars, from GT cars that are quickest on track but still street drivable, to safari cars and rally cars, all based on the 911 chassis, and then Cayennes, for overlanding and gentle off-roading. They're not rock crawlers by any means, but just something to access the wilderness safely and comfortably, and get away from people as far as possible.
Nice. So all things Porsche.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you mentioned a bit of racing. How did this journey start? Have you always been like sort of tinkering and working on cars, or, how did you get into this?
Yeah, as a kid, I was fascinated by cars. I love cars. I lived over in Germany for a summer when I was 15 years old, and got fascinated with the Autobahn. And my sister's boyfriend had a M3 lightweight, that we used to rip around in. So that was where it really set in. But, as a kid, I took apart my RC cars and, didn't always get them back together. But I always loved tinkering. And then eventually I got better and smarter and, started even improving some of my toys, but always building, tree houses and stuff like that. So being mechanically minded has just always been the case, and loving cars. So when I got the opportunity to work in a race shop when I was 20 years old, I showed up the next day and never left, and it just was onward and upward from there in a very short time frame. Nice.
And so that was that first place you started working, were they running GT cars and stuff like that?
Yeah, it was club racing here in Southern California, and it was 993 Cup and 993 RSRs, and then the 996 Cup, and the 996 was at the GT3R was really the last one I did there. And then I moved on, to Washington State, where I worked for the late Greg Fordall, who was the factory race team here in the U.S. Was Alex Job Racing. He was their chassis engineer. So that's really what got me started in chassis engineering. That's always been my passion, and always what, for some reason, came naturally to me, which is a weird thing because, chassis engineering is like the dark art these days. Everyone understands horsepower, and everyone understands now, which is shocking. They all seem to understand aerodynamics, but they skip over the most important part, which is chassis tuning. So that's really where it kicked off.
It seems to be one of those topics that you can you hear about aero numbers, and then you hear about horsepower, as you say, and then you don't hear so much about suspension, unless you know that people are into track driving stuff, and then they know they mess with their suspension. And then you might get a company like Manthey, and then you go, okay, I can send my car to Manthey, and they're going to send me an absolutely massive bill, and it's going to be better, and they will have done a lot of trick stuff in the middle. When you first were working on these cars with the 993s, presumably there was a huge evolution in that time of just what Porsche were doing. On the RSRs and whatnot. What sort of things were introduced that you were like, when the next car came along, you were like, oh, I'd always thought of doing that, or were there things like that?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, the evolution is always drastic, and for me being so young, I mean, the 993 was fantastic, but it was, and even the 996 Cup, those were basically street cars with a
Yeah.
few little tidbits of fun in there. But it really started with the 997. The 996 RSR is what I raced in American Le Mans Series and over at Le Mans.
Yeah.
And that was an incredible car. But the 997, when it came out, which was really fun, you say, oh, that's what they did. Some of the stuff we developed on the 996 RSR, like even me personally, ended up on the 997 RSR. And, that's just one of those like, cool, I did that, and Porsche was watching, because they do. I mean, when they support all the teams, they do keep an eye on what teams were developing. Now it seems they're not developing much of anything because the rules don't allow it. You can't put a part on the car that doesn't have the original part number, so to speak. So the evolution was crazy. And then I got out of racing with the 997 RSR, but we recently built a 991 GT3R for the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, and that car really was just a piece of artwork. We tore it all the way down, and rebuilt it our way, for Pikes Peak. So I had to have more suspension travel and, much more mechanical grip for that bumpy surface. And, we had 1,200 horsepower. So it's a bit wild, but
Bit
yeah,
more,
I mean, the
bit more to
evolution
deal with.
yeah, exactly.
Because with like my understanding, I've been a passenger in a 996 RSR. That was pretty cool. On track, those seem relatively simple things, and then what seemed to happen when you got to 997, there was a whole load more computers. Is that right? There's a lot more sensors and trick bits going on.
Absolutely. It got much more, just like the street cars. The 996 GT3 was a phenomenal raw car, and then the 997 was more civilized. The race car had more electronics, and they started allowing ABS and traction control, which we didn't have in the 996 RSR. So just like as the street cars evolve into being more, tech related cars, with the electronics, I mean, the race cars did too, and they just get faster and faster and more expensive, but less of the driver doing the work.
Do you find that, could say, presumably have you driven like all of the stuff that you've built?
Yeah, with the racing professionally as a mechanic and engineer, I mean, I was responsible for driving it around the paddock and getting it into pit lane. But other than that, no, I didn't really. Never very hard. That I would have loved that, but it's also really intimidating.
Yeah.
These cars are just wild, and it's sensory overload. You would need a lot of time to really be comfortable and be quick in something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and the systems. I remember. I feel like it was 997 RSR, where it was a combination. They'd basically come up with some technology, which was a combination of different sensors to work out how much tread wear had been, like how much the tires had been worn through a mix of sensors. Do you remember this?
They didn't have that from the factory, but yeah, there were those sensors, to measure tire wear and temperature, which is actually like a brilliant. I wanted to use that for Pikes Peak testing, of our GT3R, but to be able to monitor temperature, especially at Pikes Peak, because you never really get live data. At the end of a run, you can have someone up there, which we did, checking temperatures and pressures, but they are quickly turning cars around. So it's not like you have as much time as you need. And that person checking temperatures and pressures has a couple cars to do, but you wait 3 minutes and you're going to lose 15 or 20 degrees from your tires. Like, it's crazy because the surface temp there, in Fahrenheit is, 45 degrees in the morning when we're practicing, or worse. If you're up at the summit, you have surface temps in the 30s, so it's like everything. We would be in tire warmers and roll to the start, and you've already lost all your temperature. You just hope that you got enough heat in the wheel itself to keep the tire warm.
And I guess
somewhat
that would be pretty cool to be able to if you can monitor temperatures like the whole time and pressures, then you're going to get some graph of going up the hill, because then presumably down the bottom gets much hotter, up the top much colder, and then are you trying to set, where do you sort of decide to set your pressures for in that scenario?
It's really a challenge. There's a lot of math and there's a lot of guessing, because even your tire pressures change with altitude. So where you're not putting the heat into the tire and getting the pressures to rise from temperature, it's just naturally rising because of altitude. And there's it's, what is it? It goes from about 9,000 feet to 14,000 feet. So you have 5,000 feet of altitude gain during that race. So it's pretty wild trying to figure it out. So really, when it comes to race day, because that's the only time you run the full course, you're in tire warmers for a couple hours trying to get, maximum temp, on the tire, and then, set those pressures there based on all the data you took in each section every day, and think about, because you're recording religiously the ambient temperature and track temp at each section at certain times in the day, and then race day, you're racing at maybe, 11 o'clock in the morning versus, practicing at 5 a.m. So everything changes. It's wild. That's what I loved about it, is it's just a wicked challenge that, it's not for the weak. It's even dealing with the altitude as a human, you're dehydrated, you're dizzy, you're just absolutely fatigued in every way, and trying to get in as many runs as possible. So it's wild. I love it.
And that's it. And it's all for that one day.
Yeah. That's the hard part, because it can be heartbreaking. It was for us with the GT3R, because we had Reese Millen driving with us, and he was phenomenal to work with. That guy is so fast, and he's so good at setting up a car. And we had a lot of fun working together. But, we showed up in June, at Pikes Peak, and we were overall fastest in every section, all through the private tests and, even race week. And then finally, Robin Shute got his car, his Wolf going, and he was quicker. But to still be the top, or, second to top, car on the mountain, with a fresh build was awesome. But race day, it rained, and we just had to get up the hill, and we got a class win. But, we were going to be, our theoretical time was to be the first production car to be sub 9 minutes, so it's just heartbreaking. We never got to do that.
And how did you get into, well, one, you were working with some race teams, working on cars, doing endurance racing and all sorts of stuff like that. What was your sort of, was there one event you went to that was like, oh, this one is either way more challenging, like messes up the cars more, or just produce sort of more stories than any of the others?
That's a tough one, but the first one, I'm just going to go the first one to mind, because you mentioned the toughest on the car. Sebring. The 12 hours of Sebring, which is, for me, where I cut my teeth. I was 24 years old, and started racing in the American Le Mans Series. And we had Jörg Bergmeister, Pat Long, and Lucas Luhr, and you're on track every day for a week. That's the hard part too, or at least it was back then. I know they shortened the race weeks up, but you're on track, and that bumpy track just, there was stories of literally pieces of the asphalt coming up and tearing holes in the floors of cars. It never happened to me, but, we broke a damper one year, and that was the year we won, and we had the I think it was a left front damper that broke, and we were getting all the stuff out to replace it. And I overstepped my boundaries and said, hey, we can't do this. I was the rookie. And they're like, what? I'm like, look at our lap times. We're only down, I forget what it was, call it 3 seconds a lap, but we had such a lead. I was like, do the math. It's going to take me 18 minutes. Like, I knew it takes me 18 minutes to change the damper, and we're going to change the whole upright. Like, that's what it's going to be. And
that's a lot of laps.
That's a lot of laps. And they radioed, they were like, Joey's right, and they radioed the driver. I think it was Lucas in the car at the time. And they said, can you bring it home? Because we can't replace that at this point in the race. And he said, I can bring it home, and we won Sebring, which was wild. So that one is wicked. And the fans are ridiculous. Like, you look straight across the straightaway out of pit lane, and you see all these beat up campers with, these, let's not call them feats of engineering, because there's not much engineering in it, but they build these scaffolding, in the back of the truck with a couch on the top. And
so they can see you
laughing, watching these guys, absolutely drunk and passed
Yeah.
out in the sun, and you're watching their skin turn red. You're just like, these guys are nuts. And they, it was open pit, so they would roll through blasting music, with all kinds of people, with the suspension bottomed out, because there's too many
Yeah.
people in the car. It's just wild. That was fun. And then Le Mans is incredible. And we never got to get out there with the fans or anything like that. But they still, watching them in the grandstands, they were wild. And there's just that, that history, walking out into the in pit lane from your garage for the first time, and you can just hear the echoes of decades, of racing going on there. In the grandstands, there's beautiful new ones, and then there's the ones that are concrete and soil. You're like, wow, this is like a bit of original and a bit of new, and it's perfect for, for that place. So that's a wicked one.
And that must be something different. Like, one, you can go there, you can go to the events, but then to be like, that's our garage right there with our car in it that's about to go round.
Yeah. It gets you pretty choked up. I mean, you don't race for a paycheck. That's a bad model. You race for passion, and it was one of those things. I remember standing, against the wall on the front straight and just got really choked up, because I was 25. So from 20, working on my first race car, and 5 years later being at the top of the food chain at the most prestigious race in the world, like it was wild. It was one of those definite tear jerkers.
Yeah, exactly. Like club racing all the way up, and you're like, we're sort of at the top now.
And how did I get here? What did I do? And that was fun too, because everyone would ask, because I was so young, and I quickly became car chief. Just because really, honestly, it was because my schedule allowed it. The chief mechanic, he couldn't be there as long as I could, so I was in charge of preparations pre-race and post-race. So to go through the car and make a list of what we needed to change, or update between tracks. So it was one of those fun questions that these kids would come up, and they're like, or even men, they're like, how did you get into this? And I was like, don't ask me. Like, the answer I got was just like, when an opportunity presents itself, crush it. That's all I can say. That's all I ever did, is one thing led to another. And I just absolutely wore myself out, making the most of it. And it worked out for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, but that's a tough one. If you get an opportunity to sweep floors, go sweep them.
Yeah, get in the building.
Yeah, exactly.
When I had a conversation with someone, I was probably like last year, and I didn't really realize, when I heard the phrase like developing a car, like a race car, I didn't really know what that meant. And if you're presumably it's slightly different if you're a factory team, but also probably not. The start of the year, you've ordered your GT3R or RSR or whatever. It turns up from Porsche, or you've bought one from someone else. That's like your starting point. But like, what happens to that car over the course of the time that you're racing it? Like, what sort of things get changed?
Well, it's hard to say now. Like I said, because there's the BOP and not being able to. But back then, I mean, you were doing everything from just everyone tears the car down, and puts it together their way, and then you find efficiencies. That's a big thing. To be able to service the car faster is really important. Because you have very limited time. Reliability things like, wow, this is something that could rub raw right here. So let's make a new bracket that will, keep it from bouncing around or whatever. So there's a lot of that. Then you're screwing around with suspension geometry, and measuring bump steer and all of that, and just getting the data. Back then we were even screwing around with moving weight around in the car. And that was what was fun. Like I mentioned, the 996 RSR, like I moved the battery from the window, underneath the front windshield, and put it into the passenger side floor and in the solenoid on the tunnel, and that's what Porsche did with the 997, which was
nice.
Pretty cool. And we weren't allowed to have ballast in the car, inside the cockpit. but you find ways, to put ballast in because you have to meet minimum weight. Little tricks like that. We didn't get too wild, and I know a lot of teams did, but it's still my philosophy, is not get too wild. I mean, we build some wild cars, but we stick with fundamentals always. So, people that got wild usually got lost. When that first year of racing the 996 RSR against the factory team, because I didn't mention that I worked for the chassis engineer for the factory team, but then I got his blessing to race against him, and it turned into battle royale. Like, we were winning, they were winning, coming back to the shop between races, it was like screaming matches, because he didn't pay us any respect, but we're like, we're winning. But we won the championship that year. We beat Porsche with their own car, which was, it's only happened one other time, and that was with Yost. But we never really got that creative. You're rarely gonna outsmart Porsche. I wouldn't say outsmart, but like, as something gets a little bit older, like we do a lot of trick stuff with the 993, and the 996, but that was because at that time, that was the technology, that was the geometry that worked. Then you learn things as the years go on, and then you can outsmart them. But that's, they would come up with the same thing, if they continued to develop these old chassis. So, sticking with fundamentals and then just making sure that you have a properly prepared car, because the thing about racing is the variables. There's so many variables. So all you can do is control the ones that you have control of. So you really, me and my partner, the crew chief, the chief mechanic, we'd get to pit wall and we just kind of dust our hands off and look up to the sky and be like, it's all yours.
We've done our bit.
You don't know what's going to happen. All it takes is two cars, making contact in front of you, and a carbon piece comes right at your radiator or cuts your tire, and then your race is over, or you're a couple, a lap down or something. So you just control what you can, and that was the development that we really focused on. And we never had mechanical failures that year, like, except for, at Le Mans with the damper, but, that wasn't our fault. It's just, that was a design flaw, in the damper, and, it is what it is. So that's development now. Like, what we're doing with the cars now, is because we're creating something very different. Turning a Turbo S into a safari car that actually has suspension travel and the wheels clear and, protection, because it's not very high, but you got to make sure you protect the vitals. Same goes for the Overland Cayennes. And the fun part is the GT cars, the track cars. To make them, like, we have 991 GT3 RSs out at the track that are allowed in the same session as the 992 and 991 Cup cars, because they turn the same lap times with a full interior and air conditioning. The only thing is harnesses and a back half roll cage. The rest is like, it's very similar to Mantai's stuff. But even then, we focus a little bit more on compliance, which translates directly into, I can still street drive this car. And that's what we're so stoked on, is developing a car that's fast on track, but still comfortable to drive on the street. And now you don't have a one-trick pony. You truly can drive like Porsche designed, drive your car all the time, drive it to the track, beat the hell out of it for the day, and then drive home. There aren't many, other manufacturers that can build you a car that can do that. And then we improve upon that without taking away from, the comfort and the reliability.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely want to come back to that one. Something you mentioned before was building the car your way, which can be different for different people. What would you say is like your way, or the way you sort of prefer to put a car together? And like, how might that differ from, I don't know, someone else?
That's
or someone not doing it your way?
Because it's, there's a lot of that. We refer to them now as parts installers. There are a lot of parts installers. They're using, some of it is the nicest stuff, and others it's not. But you cannot just put parts on a car. There always has to be thought to everything you touch, to ensure clearances and ensure, range of articulation on a spherical arm, and then, they're adding adjustability without understanding that adjustability. That's it's the biggest flaw. Like when I left pro racing and started my previous shop with my old partner, we were a horsepower company first, and then it quickly shifted to a chassis engineering company, because we were correcting all these cars where everyone was putting in adjustable links on the 997 GT3 RSs and ruining them. I mean, absolutely ruining them, because they weren't measuring bump steer in the rear of the car. You can't put adjustable links back there without exactly knowing what you're doing. So we kept fixing all these cars, and before you know it, we were on the map as one of the better chassis tuners. So yeah, putting a car together, you have to understand, you have to understand why the manufacturer designed the car that way. So what are you taking out, and how is it going back in, or what new component is going back in, and are you truly improving this car?
Yeah.
So that's a complicated one to answer, and it'd probably be a very long-winded answer if I went into all the details and bore everyone to death. But it's about knowledge and understanding, because there's even companies out there that are doing high performance parts, but they're building headers without measuring the primary length. It might be equal length, but did you go too short? Did you go too long? They're changing out suspension components just for just to sell somebody something, or putting a brand of damper that is in no form of professional racing in a 992 GT3 RS with electronic dampers. Good luck with those lap times. You did not beat Porsche in this game. You don't, if you delete the electronics, it kind of defeats the purpose of the car. Although I love the idea because I hate electronics, but you have to understand chassis tuning. You have to understand dampers. Doing a three-way damper, a four-way damper, on these cars, you can so quickly and easily ruin the cars.
Yeah.
So know what you're getting into. Don't put adjustability where it doesn't belong. Because even people say, I know how to bump steer a car. It's like, do you though? Do you really understand like what it is that you're trying to accomplish? And you think you're going to outsmart Porsche, or the other manufacturers? Most cases, not.
That's an interesting point about adding adjustability. I remember, and it was something that stuck with me for a long time. I did a tour around Lotus ages ago, and I was asking about different options, and they were like, well, most of the cars, they come with like a fixed suspension setup, like dampers, whatever, because generally, if we let them adjust it, they adjust it wrong. I was like, you know what? I could see myself doing that on my car, like being like, I'm going to put in a super trick set of dampers, but I have no idea what I'm adjusting.
I used to allow that. Back in the day, I would set a car up and I would say, and we put triple adjustable dampers in your car, and you can just message me and tell me what you've done.
Yeah.
So many times they turned the knobs the wrong way, and they had no idea. I'm like, why are you doing this? I'm like, your tires are worn out. You're trying to tune around bad tires. Like, don't mess with what I did. So now it's just like, please don't touch it. Unless in the rare occasion that these drivers are sharp enough that they understand it. They're of engineering background as well. So yeah, I mean it's all too often like we manufacture our own control arms, and we took out adjustability in just about every arm that wasn't absolutely necessary, which made them more expensive, because you can do a threaded rod end, left hand, right hand, and just turn it for length. But you don't know when you build stuff like that. That's the cheaper way, but you have no way of measuring where you are. So shim adjustability is best, and we use that in some arms, but others we just made a solid dog bone, and that was your replacement piece. Excuse me. Because I used to sit on my email and on the phone trying to engineer a car in Hawaii. And I'm just like, you guys are so lost. I can't help you. I'm like, take your arms out of the car. Do you have the stock arm still? They're like, yes. I'm like, okay, just put it in the vise and use that as your fixture and set them to stock lengths. and do not touch them ever again. Because you just, anytime you touch it, you ruin the car. And here's your damper settings, leave it alone. If you want to go beyond that, fly me out there and I'll tune the car at the track. But typically we get them so good out of the box, it doesn't require much of anything. And like we just recently went out to Thermal Club, which is a private motorsport country club here, and did a new setup on a couple cars, and they were talking about it's a little too aggressive in the front. And I was like, I knew that was going to happen, but I wanted you to experience it first. So we detuned the front just a little bit with 3 clicks of rebound, I think I did, and just got it to release quicker, so that they were able to get a more neutral mid corner reaction out of the car. And then they were like, that was it, I can't believe it. Like, it is that easy, although I have to like not say that because it's just as easy to screw it up.
Yeah. That was when I heard about the 992 GT3 RS with the the adjustable dampers and whatnot. The idea that you can go do a lap, put everything like full stiff or whatever, try it out, come back, switch it the other way. That was super appealing to me because you don't have to stop. You don't have to adjust it. You have to try it. Like I've done it on race cars where we've run like a full stiff setup or whatever, just to, as you say, to like, you want to know what's too far, or at least then, so well, at least from like a feel point of view, this is what it feels like. But doing that process, at least on like a sort of road bias car and without other people, and just takes a lot of time and effort. Whereas the idea of just like playing with it does seem quite fun.
It does, if you know what you're doing. Like
even if you don't know what you're doing, it's fun.
Yeah, it's true. It is fun. The car sucks, but that was fun.
Yeah. And then I always have in the back of my mind, like you mentioned about tires or whatnot, like, are you on a fresh set of tires? And then for me, it's like, but are you driving correctly? Because you could drive differently and you would have slightly different characteristics through all the corners. And you're like,
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one, especially with, cars that understeer really bad. A lot of people will just sit and let it plow. It's like, stop doing that. Like, you really need to get the nose to take a set and then lean on it, and if it's not, you gotta change how you enter the corner, or whatever it is. But that's the funny thing too. I've worked with drivers that are so frustrating. Sometimes, Jeff Zwart, who I've done a Pike's Peak with and rally, sometimes he frustrates me because he can drive around anything. And he's like, it's fine. I'm like, it's not fine. Like, I can make it better. And he's like, nah, it's fine. I'm like, please let me make it better. Like, I know I can make this better for you. You just got to tell me what it's doing. It's fine. If I just go in a little deeper, and get to throttle sooner, I'm fine. I'm like, I know, but there's a fast way of doing this.
Yeah.
Let me show you, so every so often he'll be like, okay, fine, go for it. I'm like, thank you. It's funny that way. And that I credit to him too, because, there's a lot of drivers out there that can just figure it out. Pat Long was one of those guys too, is you could give him any car, and he would just be happy, but he knew how to optimize it. I mean, those guys were so good at tuning their own car. It was really a hoot.
Yeah, because I did an interview with someone who trained engineers, like test driving engineers that test for manufacturer cars and just do laps and laps and laps and laps and laps. And I think the way they aim to drive is basically like a robot. Like, their inputs are exactly the same every single time, every single corner. And then your test data is like exactly the same, lap after lap after lap, and then you can adjust it and whatever. But yeah, if you've got a driver that's like, that's not my priority, I just want to go do some laps and we'll make it as fast as possible. They're like, well, my window is much bigger. We'll be quick within this window as long as it doesn't go outside that. Yeah.
That's impressive with those guys that can be the robot. It's the consistency. It's like, it's fun, when people are like, I'm really quick on track, the ego starts to flare, and it's like, yeah, you threw out a zinger. Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Can you do that every lap?
Yeah.
And now can you do it with racecraft with other people on track with you? There's a very big difference between, throwing down a fast lap and doing it consistently and then doing it, in a race scenario. And those guys, the pros, are just incredible, where they can just be like, even Jeff, again, he would say, that was good. I can qualify 5 seconds faster. And then he'll go do that. And you're like, what? I mean, exactly. Yeah. This, on qualifying day or on race day, it's going to be this, and he'll do exactly what he said.
Yeah.
Even in the rally car, we built him the 997 Cup car into a gravel rally car.
Okay.
And he would say, oh yeah, this is, it's like I'm dealing with a 12-year-old boy, just slinging dirt. He's just having a ball, but he's like, oh yeah, I've got 3 more seconds in the car, next run, and he'll go and do that.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Those are the real, like, Reese was the same way. He knew exactly like what we needed for the car, and he didn't know the 911. That was the first time he raced a 911. So there was a little bit of a learning curve, but I had no worry. The guy's a stunt driver, so he's driving every different car that's not supposed to behave in the way he makes it behave.
Yeah.
Like the commercial stuff is like, yeah, right. You can't do that with that car. Like, how'd you do that? And he always tells these little secrets. And it's like, that's
these little tricks to send that truck sideways that shouldn't be going sideways through that gap or whatever.
Yeah.
Wild and then stuff. those guys, it's like, it's not just in the car that they race. They know exactly. It's like the difference between a super fast amateur driver and a pro is like, they'll do that in any car, any day, any track. They'll do like a lap to work out the car, and then that's it. Bang.
There was with the 996 RSR, my crew chief gave us the wrong master cylinders to put in the car.
Okay.
And Jörg Bergmeister was driving. And I think it was basically what we ended up with 2 front master cylinders, instead of a front and rear, and they had different sizes, for tuning.
Yeah.
But anyways,
so your bias is like wonky as hell.
Yeah. So it was funny because Jörg came in, and it was a neat relationship I had with those guys, because they knew my engineering background and that I worked at home with their old boss at the factory team, Greg Fordall. So they would come over and lean on me, for information. I wasn't the engineer on the car, but I did a lot of the engineering with them, so, and I battled with the so-called engineer that we had, I battled with him on occasion, on setup stuff. But Jörg came in after that practice session. He goes, something's up with the brakes, guys. What did you change? We're like, well, we put new master cylinders in. He goes, yep. You got the wrong size ones in there. And I was like, what? And we go and look at part numbers, and we're like, Dennis, you gave us the wrong master cylinder. And he knew it.
Yeah.
He could feel it right away. It was pretty, actually, I don't think he even asked me if we had done what we had done.
Yeah. He was like,
I think he's like, hey, I think we have the wrong master cylinders. Did you guys change them? And we're like, yeah, we did. And yep, they're wrong. That was just the ability for them to pinpoint, because they are robots, and that car becomes their baby, on that weekend. Because those guys were also racing different series all over the world. Sometimes they'd fly in while we were in practice. We're already on track and hot, and they roll in and change into their suit and go. And then they throw down zingers within, 2 or 3 laps. Like, you just got off an international flight.
And they're like, that's what I do.
Yeah. That's what I do. Yeah, exactly.
Your stuff. I know this stuff. Yeah. It's incredibly impressive. When you've gone about designing stuff to put on the cars, like rear control arms, what led you to make your own bits, and how do you decide what you want to do?
Well, we just decided we needed to do our own, because these cars have gotten so good, and so many of the aftermarket parts are just not nice enough. And that was like, this is ridiculous. These cars are incredible, and they should not be, swapping out parts for inferior rod ends with, studs that rust, and anodize them normal, where they get chipped and scratched to hell. Like, it just didn't make sense, and again, adjustability were not needed, and then, saying, knowing that these people get lost, in their adjustments, doing adjustable tension arms for caster, having that threaded piece. You don't really know where you're setting the car, and you don't know if they're even side to side. So I decided to make a shim style adjustable tension arm, so you could count the shims. And then those phone calls and emails of people being lost in their setup basically went away. It's like, because you'd say, how many shims should I put? Well, set the car this way, and that's it. Or if there's a problem, my car's pulling to the left or to the right, like count your shims over there. Do you have them matched up? Are they even? Yeah, they're even. Okay, we got a different problem. But it really was about the materials used, because especially if you're still street driving them, I can't stand squeaks and rattles, so it has to have high quality bearings, and the tolerances need to be right. Because it was as bad as, there's companies out there that get the tolerances so wrong that they're breaking subframes because they've had to pull the ears in on the aluminum subframes to get, to tighten the control arm. Right. Now it's under tension and eventually it snaps. It's like, that's unacceptable. These poor customers that end up paying all this money, and deal with frustration of failures. We're supposed to be enhancing the car, not taking away. Like, it needs to be performance without compromise is really kind of our, unofficial slogan. So that's how we started, was seeing everyone makes control arms, but really seeing that the quality wasn't there, adding too much adjustability, to where most shops are going to get lost, or even a lot of these guys will work on their own cars. They get lost in the adjustments and the car's ruined. So just put them in, you got rid of rubber bushings. Now you have spherical, you have instead of a pressure casted control arm, now it's a, billet control arm. So everything's more rigid. And then from there, everything else is just seeing, as you're setting the cars up, like, oh boy, it would be really nice if we could adjust this or adjust that. Like, we even do non-GT stuff. So it's like adding shim adjustability to the rear lower control arm, just like a GT3, using a GT3 shim, but it's a different control arm altogether because it's a fork in the back of the Carreras and, turbos. So just seeing where there's room to improve. Like, what do people need? I need a little more camber in the rear, or I need less, or whatever it is. So you start to cater to that.
And are most of your customers sort of hard track enthusiasts, or a mix of people who are just like, oh, I just want to kind of mess with my road car a bit?
There's a mix of both. We do some serious track rats, but we do a lot of, it's Southern California. It's like the hub for the car culture. So there's a lot of really great cars that we've built that see the track once or twice in a year, but they just go out and they really, really enjoy the drive. And that's, again, what we pride ourselves in, is like, you don't need, because people will call asking for these upgrades, and they're like, but I'm not a racer. I'm like, and I'm not going to give you a race setup, because that's my other thing, is like, that's a fictional term. And they're like, what do you mean that's a fictional term? You used to be a race engineer and mechanic. Yeah, well, a race setup is a tailored setup. That's all that it is. We're tailoring the car with the components that it has for the conditions at that particular track for those drivers. That's it. So it's a tailored setup. Now, what's fun to tell people is like, okay, now watch the 24 Hours of Daytona or the 24 Hours of Le Mans. They're all filming with high-speed cameras, and when they go into a commercial, they will do slow motion of these cars hitting curves. Look how it moves. That's moving a lot, isn't it? And when you slow it down, because that's how slow you're driving, you need to see that the cars are moving. When you push one of those cars to the absolute limit, it's moving. It's transitioning weight to the nose under braking and squatting under acceleration. And they're just setting those parameters specifically for that track, for those conditions, for that driver. So that we do the same thing for the street car guys. Like, I can use all the same components, and it's better if we do. You put a race damper, but you put settings for the street with spring rates for the street, and making sure you don't have too many, packers in there and limiting suspension travel, because that's pretty uncomfortable. Sure, it's good for aero load, but It's a street car,
Yeah.
and we don't have the tracks like Europe where they're super high speed, so setting them a little higher for the street, letting the aero load, squat the car, it's fine by me.
Yeah.
That's a benefit. But giving a tailored setup, like you're going to go to the track 20% and 80% street, so we set the car to work in that way. And we learn more at Pike's Peak to do that than anywhere, because it's the hardest race I've ever had to engineer a car, because it's 3 courses in one. You've got the bottom section, which is fast and flowy. You got the middle that's very tight and mostly pointed uphill. So you really need weight transitioning. And then the top is very fast and very bumpy. Cars get airborne, literally, because they come with a road course setup, and we did much softer, much more compliant, and then before you know it, it's like, wow, that's the street, something that like you let the car move, but control the movement, in a way that is predictable for the driver. Because if it's predictable, they're more confident, they're more comfortable, they're going faster on track, so that was the other thing. Like Zwart said, he's like, when the 991 came out and we were making all these improvements, he's like, I don't understand what you're doing. He's like, these cars are already too fast for the owners. And I said, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. But yes, I'm making them faster, but that's not my goal. Like my goal is to make it more predictable and make them more comfortable, make their tires last longer, because we get sometimes triple the life out of tires, for these guys that go to the track. And that's the biggest expense for them.
Yeah.
Race fuel, track time, and then tires. And the tires are so expensive. It's like, oh, maybe I don't want these control arms. Well, maybe you do, because it's going to be easier for you to focus on your craft versus chasing a car down and how it's not behaving the way you want it to. And then your tires, make them last much longer. It's like you spend a couple grand in control arms, you're going to save a couple grand in tires. See, we're eco-friendly.
Yeah, exactly. So and are you saving on tires because the way the suspension is compressing and whatever, you're evenly loading the tires more of the time? Is that why?
Basically. So it's, when it comes down to it, like you said, the temperatures that you saw that the car was reading live, the higher the temperature, the more friction, right? So most of the time these guys are going with a car that's set up for the street, and Porsche wants them to understeer. So we had that discussion. You sit in an understeer, you're cooking the outside of the tire and wearing it thin, or there's the other, you cook the inside because you have too much camber. It's about optimizing, again, the tailored setup, optimizing the car for its intended use with that driver. So we know the cars well, we know the components, we know the tire sizes and the brands of tires, and you start to make it so, the car is leaning, so now your camber, trying to use my hands in the screen, now your camber is going flat, because there's a little bit of body roll, and the tire is tucking under the car. If you've seen those awesome photos, of the cars loaded up on a slick and it looks like it's about to debead. Those are my favorite photos, because like that's hooked up. Like it looks like it's just going to rip the tire off and deflate. That's distributing heat across the tire. So you're just trying to optimize it for what its intended use is, and you tend to set it up a little. I'm going to give away secrets. You tend to set it a little more for track if they go to the track more frequently, because you see more tire wear on track versus you do just, commuting, or whatever on the street.
Yeah, like I have a 997 RS, and that absolutely destroys the rear tires with the, it's in this, I think it's just like basically like a stock setup pretty much. I think I have the rear anti-roll bars a bit stiffer, but yeah, it just absolutely destroys the inside of the rear tires. Just
see that it doesn't need to
rolling around.
It doesn't need to.
No, agreed.
We'll work on this for you. We'll send you some components, because those cars are notorious. I mean, best car. Don't ever get rid of it. Those things are. I still would love to have one, because it's the last of the raw, real drivers cars. But that multi-link suspension with rubber bushings, it flexes, so you get that wiggle, that nervous wiggle, and it's like you don't want a nervous wiggle out of a 911. So to get rid of some of that rubber induced spherical, and you won't hear it, it won't make the car noisier, You know, you hear a little bit more of the tire on cracks in the road, but it's not a rattle or a squeak. But you get rid of that and you set the camber and the toe where you want and distribute that heat across the tire. Cause now it's for you, you have, your toe settings might be wrong or your camber is wrong, but it's just cooking the inside. So you can change that and redistribute it. And it makes it more fun too, because the tire works better when you're using more of it. Seems like
Mhm.
a simple statement, but
It is.
you
It
know,
is a
it
simple statement. Yeah.
yeah, most people don't get it. They're like, how? I need to have this much camber. No, you have too much. See how it's wearing on the inside. That is, or your toe settings are too light. You've using more of that really wide tire. You have a 325, I think, right? It's over
Yeah. Yeah.
315.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge.
Use more of the tire. Don't just cook that inside. And they're like, still, it's the dark art. It's like it's some voodoo stuff.
And then that is because you've got a balance, don't you? If you're like, at the moment, I don't really drive that car on track at
Yeah.
all. So it gets driven on the road, and then you're like, well, I probably don't need anywhere near the amount of camber in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
But by putting in more solid stuff, do you mess with the compliance a little bit?
No, no, because it's still the compliance comes from the damper and the spring rate. What you're messing with is deflection. So Porsche designed that suspension to work a certain way. The camber gain and the toe change under compression, like it's to their design. But when you're loaded up in a corner, that rubber is deflecting. So your toe is changing, your camber is changing. So it's moving around and it's not stable. So when you switch away to rubber bushing or from rubber bushings to spherical, now you're taking away that deflection. So you get the camber gain, you get the toe change under compression as Porsche intended. So you're still it's doing what it's supposed to, but now without that deflection where it's nervous, and flexing itself out of the spec that they want. So it really doesn't, if you keep with a soft spring rate and soft damper settings, it really, again, control the movement. Like I have full control over this because it's not deflecting out of the range that Porsche wanted or that I wanted, and then it's that much better.
Yeah. So it should just be going up, down. I mean, it's not quite up, down, but let's say up, down with no little side to side wiggles all the way through in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. So it's like it's a little bit active. We do a lot of work for bump steer when necessary, and that's the toe change under compression. So you can tune it to have less or more, and you want to make sure it's even from side to side, obviously, because then the car is steering from the back without any inputs, which makes it impossible to drive. Especially when it's like it does it really bad when you take left-handers and not so bad when you take right-handers. It's like, what the hell? How do you work
Yeah.
around that? So deflection's the same thing. Like if you expect your half a millimeter of toe change under this scenario, whatever,
Yeah.
that's not happening when you load it because you got the loaded tire wiggling, and it's
Yeah.
it's dynamic but not in a controlled state.
And I guess a question would be, why wouldn't Porsche have just done this from factory?
Because they're road cars and they're German. But they have done it. They finally gave in, with the 991 GT3 RS with the Visoc package had solid bushings.
Oh,
And
really?
then
Oh, okay.
the 2019 GT3 RS also, it didn't even need to be the Visoc, and they went to solid bushings. And now the 992 GT3 and GT3 RS have solid bushings.
Ah,
So they
okay.
did.
So
They
they have done
finally
it.
they were
Yeah.
like, okay, if you guys are all right with this, we're all right with it. Because it's they have to engineer a car too. So this is to their defense. They're brilliant at it. They engineer cars for a very large demographic, from the old timers to the young kids to no track use, to lots of track use. They are catering to everyone. And that's what I have to answer too, because they're like, how are you outsmarting Porsche? I'm like, I'm not. I'm tailoring for a more specific person instead of everyone. With hundreds of thousands of people. Like I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the couple thousand, people that I work with. And even then it's to the individual and what they're going to use the car for. So
Yeah.
I'm not, they're capable. I mean, they build the best race cars on the planet. They can, but that's not their goal when they're doing that, and so in some ways, their hands are tied because it's a company that needs to make money, and sometimes that spherical bearing is just too damn expensive,
Mm.
or those dampers are just too expensive to give everyone. So
Or they go 997, we're not going to have it. Early 991, we're not going to have it. But then we're going to switch it. It's going to be one of the things that's coming in the in the pipeline.
Yeah, and you have to leave some room for future improvements. It'd be interesting to sit in on some of those meetings, that the bosses have, but also probably infuriating. Because racing with Porsche, got infuriating because they just wouldn't do things because of political reasons that was way above my pay grade.
Yeah.
But for us, we're like, but it can be better. Like, please do this.
It's like, no.
So nope. That's a bad
No.
idea. Next generation of RSR comes out and they did it. It's like, you jerk. It's very cool though.
So when you opened your first shop, which then evolved into the one you're in now, is it a same business, different business?
Different business. I had a partner, right out of racing professionally. We were together for 8 years, and now this one is 8 years old. So equal amounts of time of being an entrepreneur and business owner.
And were you who were your sort of first customers? Who were you getting in? What were you doing?
There was a lot of weekend warriors originally on both businesses. This business, Emotion Engineering, it started, some customers that knew me already that I had worked with in the past, and then word started to spread. Word, it's always been word of mouth. But right out of the gate, I built with, because of my history with Pat Long, he started the brand Luftgekühlt. So I think I can't even remember what number it was, like maybe for the fifth one, decided to build a G body safari car and auction it, for a cause. Cause they're like, our events are taking off, but it needs to have a little more meaning to it. We want to attract new people and make it for a good cause. So I built the car with help from Rod Emery in the design category. We built this car and the auction was a huge success. And we decided to do another one for the very next year, but that was a commission build. So it started,
Nice.
it started really there. Those were some of my bigger projects that evolved to, other opportunities. Like I helped did a lot of the heavy lifting on the prototype Gunther Works car.
Okay.
Jeff Gamroth from Rothsport built the engine and transmission, and I did the chassis work, and some of the other, that, like I said, making sure that the the oil coolers up in the nose were as efficient as possible, and using some tricks that we learned from the 993 RSR back in the day, and making sure that there's, laminar airflow to the cooler and out of it, and making sure the lines were routed in a reliable manner, like all that kind of stuff, which, um, doesn't get the impressions,
No.
and no bragging rights because I routed those lines right. But it comes down to that driving experience, is when there's no problems, there's no leaks, there's, you get to, like with the rally car with Jeff, like go run up and down these logging roads or fire service roads at 10 tenths or sometimes more, run after run after run, did I do anything absolutely wicked? It was some stuff, getting enough suspension travel out of a GT3 is a challenge, but we did it and had enough protection where he could run it, so it's just about building a quality car that is reliable. Those are the projects. That's where we're at. Those were some of the big name projects that we started with. There's others like, doing Pikes Peak with Jeff in the 935. That was also a big one that people really took notice. They're like, this one man show at the time, doing, out of this little shop by the beach, has a all carbon bodied 935, and he's going to run it at Pikes Peak with Jeff Zwart. It was like, well, who is this guy? It's like, well, I was the man behind the curtain for a long time.
And how did that come about? Because like, have you known Jeff for a long time, and then did he have? Was that his car? Was it someone else's car? I can't remember.
It was someone else's car that he used for a few years. It came about because actually at my previous business, he came to us because we were building, we were a chassis company, but also doing massive horsepower stuff. And at the time, we were building 996 and 997 turbos up to 1600 horsepower. So he had kept his eye on us, and he walked in one day and he's like, "Hey, I'm Jeff." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know who you are. We have posters of you." Like, he was kind of a legend as we were, growing up in our early 20s. Because it's a rare thing racing Pikes Peak, especially he was doing it in the dirt days in 911s. So he said, I want to, my best car that I've ever run there was the 997 Cup. And the fastest one was the 997 GT2 RS. I want to put those two cars together. Can you do it? We're like, oh yeah, absolutely.
Sounds fun.
And we did. We ran the car with him for 3 years, and we had, I forget, we had issues the first year just based on temperatures. The second year that we had to put a fuel cell in, but the lift pumps in the Porsche Cup fuel cell are notorious for going bad prematurely, and that happened on year 2. So we finished the first year we ran, we finished third. Second year we ran, we finished second, and then finally we won with a 997 Turbo Cup. The Ladybug, the Luminox car, if you recall. A lot of people still remember that. I think it's right there behind me.
Oh yeah.
So, we had worked together in the past, and knowing the 935 just was going to need chassis work, he was very comfortable in working with me on that car. So I think we ran it together for 3 years, roughly. Something like that.
And I have that car, and I remember when that came out, and I remember like it looks really cool. But I remember at the same time the GT2 RS Club Sport came out, and they're very similar, aren't they?
They're identical.
Is there any difference in like performance or anything because they've got a slightly different shape?
It's got more aero on the 935. I don't have numbers, which is funny because everybody wants numbers now. It's like, oh, you understand the numbers, okay? But it was even just the visual. There were some of the workers on Pikes Peak. They're like, oh my god, the dust plume that the 935 kicks up, that is just so much more than the GT2 RSs. That long tail is effective, and that slope nose as well. Other than that, basically the front splitter floor was different on the 935, but the rockers are different on the 935, and the big vents on the front fenders. But that long tail was a big thing. The diffuser and the rest of the floor was the same as the GT2 RS Club Sport. So virtually, they are GT2 RSs, just stripped down, and turned into a race car. Obviously they don't strip it down and turn it into a race car. It's, pulled from production early, but it's a street engine, a street transmission. It's pretty basic.
And they are, I always thought they were like slightly different, but they're basically the same, just more stripped and a bit more trick parts and whatnot.
Yeah. They're, they've got different uprights like the Cup car, so you can run 18-inch wheels. They have race brakes, proper race KW, KW competition, 3 ways, front and rear, all solid bushings. But yeah, it's a street car, with ABS and traction control, and it's a PDK, so it's not the GT3R. It doesn't have that Ricardo sequential, which is far superior, but pretty impressive car. Really, really cool. For a club racer, or again, those weekend warriors, to go rip around in a
well, that is what that car is, isn't it? It's not racing anything. Okay, you can take it up Pikes Peak, but there's no series to race those in.
Right. There was some where they put the GT2s and the Club Sports together over in Europe, but not here. And I think a few people did try to race them, but they're just, the numbers are there, but they're not. It's a heavy car, and a PDK is fast for a street car, but it's not fast as a race car. a full race car, GT3 and up.
And what are the main, just in terms of like shift times and then weight?
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy car. If I remember, I mean, it's street car kind of heavy. It's like 3,200 pounds if I remember. But the transmission is very, very very soft and very slow in comparison. But you drive it on the street and you're like, wow, this is a really fast and violent transmission. Not when you compare it to the Ricardo, that just punches you in the back of the head every time you pull a gear.
Yeah, or you change down and it's like
yeah. Like I said, Porsche knows how to build a race car. Like they really, really do. I mean, to say, you take a GT2 and put race dampers, race control arms, race brakes on the car, and all this composite bodywork, you think like that's a race car. No,
yeah.
Check out the GT3R. That's a piece of mechanical wizardry. Like they are just, at 550 horsepower, they will smoke 1,000 horsepower build, off of a street car.
Yeah.
There's something special about a properly engineered and properly developed car.
It is. It always surprises me how quick. Like I don't know whether I should be surprised, but like how quick a proper race car is. Like a proper race car with not tons, like you say, like 500 horsepower or whatever they are, 550 or something now, and so fast.
It's incredible. It really is. Because the GT2 has 700. You think, well, the weight difference and the PDK, that 200 horsepower makes up for it. It doesn't.
No,
it absolutely doesn't.
And this is a lot of that chassis wizardry you talk about.
Yeah. And that's it is, because it's not, again, the term is pretty much reserved for the suspension engineering, but chassis tuning is your gear ratios. It's your setup on your differentials, your aerodynamics, and that's not just rear or front, and mid. You're trying to balance the aero while balancing the suspension, while balancing the transmission and diff. And then there's the brakes. Tuning ABS, compounds, front and rear, and setting up the bias there. There's just so many variables. And again, you want to control the variables, that you have control of. So you really want to get that window from being giant down to this really perfect little setting where you have the driver happy, which translates to the street cars too. Like I said, you throw a bunch of adjustability at people, they're just going to get lost. It's too big of a window to narrow down and get right.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun delivering, because it's about reactions. And that's the one thing, like, we don't market very well. We just started a YouTube channel. This is my marketing. Like, I always called it guerrilla marketing. Like, get an opportunity to talk to people and get them excited and have fun. Other than that, it's just all word of mouth. But we did start a YouTube channel to start talking about the projects, because we do, you could do a $70,000 build and set it on the ground and you have no idea that I was there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of disappointing for some people, because they're like, well, what's so exciting about that? Like, well, let's do a comparison test, which I'm going to start doing some of that when I have bandwidth to have, set aside that amount of time.
Yeah.
But have a common driver and, put them in a stock GT3 RS versus one of our GT3 RSs. And maybe even if we get the opportunity, another shop's GT3 RS.
Yeah.
And like, here are the differences, but it's the hardest thing to get across to people is the driving experience. Now even Porsche does it. Like, every manufacturer goes and sets a time on Nürburgring.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you?
It doesn't mean shit.
That doesn't mean anything for you. Like, why are you so excited about that? And people are like, power. And now even some of the tuners, finally, I was happy to hear, on these turbo builds, because it's, the Carreras are all turbo. They're going for big power on track. And there's S's and GTSs that are faster than GT3s, but some of them are really, really terrible at putting the power down. So there's software guys that are like dialing back the torque, and I was like, thank God, you get it. Usable power.
Yeah,
that is very important
on the ground.
Yeah, putting it down. There's a reason the engine's in the back. Well, a number
Yeah.
of reasons, but you want to be able to put power down and make it usable. You want to the driving experience is not about all hell breaking loose. It's about having the car behave the way you want and having it, take the turns perfectly and put the power down perfectly and hit the brakes perfectly without upsetting the chassis too much. You can't Lap times don't tell that story. And I don't know how we're going to tell that story without putting people in the car.
Yeah. A good that's the thing that someone said at one point, which I think sort of it made sense to me, was you can have, let's say you've got your let's say a new GT3 RS or whatever, 997, 991, 992, put a pro driver in it, Jorg or someone, send them around the Nürburgring and they get a lap time, or your local Grand Prix track or whatever, Silverstone, it's 2 minutes, 5 seconds or whatever it is. Then you put a competent punter, like who's maybe done quite a bit of track driving, but not professional in, and let's say they do 2 minutes, 15 seconds or 20 or something. They're like 15 seconds slower. Then you take a car that's been optimized in the way you're talking about, and the pro driver might be 5 seconds faster, 4 seconds faster, or something, or maybe a bit less, maybe 3 seconds faster. But when you take the fast amateur, they are then much closer to the pro driver because it's more comfortable. Like, they are more comfortable in the car. It's more progressive, or it's, you don't have to be the pro driver, as we were talking about, can drive around all the stuff that makes it tricky to drive fast. Whereas when you make these cars, you develop them better in the way you're talking about, it's easier for the amateur to push because they're more comfortable.
Right, right, absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And it's fun. It's fun. I mean, you used Jurg, and Jurg is the ambassador for Porsche now, and does the development driving. Um, One of the Air Water, which is a spinoff of Luftgekühlt, was here local in Costa Mesa, California. Jurg came into town, and I was like, Jurg, I haven't seen you in years. I was like, come by the shop. And he's like, I got time tomorrow. And it was the coolest thing because usually, when it comes to events and it comes to, someone like him, the time is very limited, or they, have an entourage of other people that they're cruising with. He just rolled in by himself in his rental car, and he spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours just telling old racing stories with me and talking about the cars. And of course, he was talking about the new with the 991, or sorry, the 992 GT3 RS and how great it was. And I was like, yeah, I've heard you talking about that. And then he started talking about, other development cars that aren't released yet. And he's just like, these are like, this is incredible. And I'm not reading stuff very frequently. I keep my nose to the grindstone, but whatever was recently released, the hybrid.
Oh yeah,
911,
the
right?
new GTS.
He was like, that's incredible. He's like, it is so good, like so good. And I wasn't getting a rehearsed
Yeah.
political,
No.
Jurg. I was getting my old buddy, and he
Yeah.
was just to have it unfiltered was so cool, and hear his enthusiasm, about the cars. And it was really really cool. But yeah, it would be fun, if I could get more time, and do some of these comparison tests with someone like Jurg or Pat or Tanner. All these are, my old buddies, like to be able to throw them in a street car and throw them in and get these lap times, and show people like, here's what a stock one is, which is fantastic. And here's what a tailored one is. And, you know, I the fun part is, people are chasing tenths, but I've had cars come to me, whether it's a 993, or a 991 GT3 RS. And I'll be like, I can guarantee you 3 seconds. Or a really bold one, I can guarantee you 6 seconds. And what's funny, they're like, no way. And I'm like, I am guaranteeing it. And then they scream when they get to the track. They're like, you said 3 seconds, I got 5, like, yeah, and what did you do? And it's
Yeah.
that dark art of making the car just behave itself for you, and there's nothing more fun.
That experience, that person, at the track, chatting to their mates, whatever. That is what sells your business. Like, people go, oh, my friend who Tom got some of these upgrades from this company, and like, he is now 5 seconds a lap faster. What the?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
he says it's
exactly.
great. I need to get me
Right.
some of that.
And again, that's the best form. Word of mouth is the best form of marketing. So I have to remind myself it's the slower pace, because the world revolves around marketing now. And you're not the best unless you claim you're the best. And
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
actually, drink that Kool-Aid. They're like, they're the best. Why? Because you see their name everywhere. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why. Like, no, they're parts installers. We are engineers. Like, we are faster than them on track and for less money. We didn't like completely sell you everything in a catalog. It's an interesting world we live in, but the word of mouth is the best. And that's why we did Pike's Peak, is to showcase we're not just a chassis tuner. We can build turbo monsters as well, and the hardest race you could possibly do with a GT car. We can go out and show that what we're capable of. But now it's back to just keeping our nose to the grindstone and making people happy, because that is the most rewarding too, man. I'll tell you, like those phone calls, some of them aren't about the track. I've literally had, because we're our shop right now is right next to the airport, and there's 3 freeways that intersect right here. And I will get a phone call before they've even made it to the freeway. They're like, "Oh my God, it's amazing." I'm like, "You haven't even done anything yet." They're like, "Yeah, but I can tell. It's so wild." I'm like, "Well, you can." And I'm glad you noticed, but like turning, these gentlemen into 12-year-old boys,
That's cool.
and some women, like it's a riot. And it's so much
Yeah.
fun to just have those reactions and have them jumping up and down at the track. And, I've even had them like run over and hug me, like, "I can't believe
Wow.
that this car is so good." Like, I love it, man. That's so cool. "You want to
That's
drive it?" I'm like,
cool.
"No, I got enough out of you. Like, this is good for me."
That is cool. What did I see? I saw a picture of a 993 GT1. Did you have a
Oh
993
yeah.
GT1 in your shop the other day?
Not the other day. I just reposted it, because that car recently went up for auction.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the only privateer 993 GT1s. I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting who campaigned the car, but anyways, yeah, it's the yellow with kind of like paintbrush
Sick
purple, red,
livery.
and
Yeah.
it's a great livery. But there's a lot of collections around here, and we occasionally maintain some of them, because these cars are older, and the guys that used to work on them, are retired or passed on. So there's a real shortage of mechanics that understand cars, understand, they might work in shops and do like okay work, but really the important part is don't just do it out of repetition, like understand what you're working with. And I never worked on a 993 GT1. I mean, that was a dream come true when I got to work on that. And it really is. The thing is, it's a purpose built race car. So they look like a lot, but everything has a purpose. And there's a reason that is routed in that direction and that is mounted like that. And it's very, very simple, um, so to speak. You
Yes.
still have to have a lot of expertise, and but it comes down to understanding what you're touching. It's not just nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
Unlike a lot of people believe it is. It's like, you just took that off and you put it back on. And why did it take so long? Because you have to know what you're working with, and you have to
100%.
get the torque specs right, and you have to paint stripe it, and all this stuff. But that was really cool, and that was just some simple maintenance work. Um, and people are like, what are you upgrading? Like, no, you don't upgrade an $8 million
Turbos.
piece of heritage. Like, yeah, I mean, I would love to if somebody was that crazy. But
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
don't do that. That hurts the
We
value
can make
of
it
the car.
faster.
Let's just make it not smoke when you start it up. How about we do that? Because they just,
Yeah.
unfortunately, sitting cars, it's so bad for them. So we do a lot of, just making it stop smoking on startup and get them on a regimen of, oil services and, changing out
Mm.
the fuel. And, you want to get it nice and hot. So you get everything lubed up so that, seals don't dry up and, start weeping everywhere. So it's been fun because we've had some really, really great cars. Like one of my favorites from the same gentleman was an RS30, a 74 RS30. Oh man. I mean, it's kind of funny because, we're more modern car guys at my age, but like those cars, really, Porsche has always been doing RSs right. The 73, the 74, they skipped a while and, got to the 964, which we didn't even get here. And the 964 Carrera RS is awesome. The 993 RS, awesome, right out of the box. Can we improve on it? Absolutely. But like it's a good lightweight car with good power and great gear ratios. Like that 73 was one of my all-time favorites though. Or sorry, 74 RS30.
Yeah. And that is probably that's the last race car that you can drive.
Right. So it actually, from what I understand, it was the 73 2.8 RSR became the 74 RS30. Like get underneath that car, I was like, this is actually a race car. Like this is an RSR. And they truly were. So most of them, the one we had was never it was never raced. And most people bought them as a street car and converted them into full-fledged race cars. So that was a rare one that was never actually raced. But I mean, just so cool. Such a great car. One of the best mechanical, the mechanical fuel injection made such incredible induction noise.
Yeah.
That's what I love. I mean, people put loud exhaust on everything and it's like, no, quiet the exhaust down just to the point of where you're making horsepower, because now everyone just blows that out. They're trying to make a statement with straight pipes and everything, but they're losing power. But
Yeah.
they're also taking away from that incredible induction noise. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a symphony. Let it sing. Don't just make it sound like a broken lawnmower. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
please.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you need a bit of everything. You need to build
Right.
the whole experience. Because you've had a G body 911 for a long time.
Yep. My personal hot rod. Um, yeah, it's a fun one. It's a special car, and it is up for sale. I mean, it's not listed anywhere, but I got that car when I was racing professionally. I was also club racing that first year with the spec 944. Um, had a lot of fun, but it was prepping that car. Then I'd go on the road racing, come back and race my car, go back on the road racing. It was just too much racing. I was like, I love racing, but this is too much. So sold that car, quit club racing, and then bought this 911. And it was like, I'm going to have a street car. Well, I was also still broke, and had a 911.
Yeah.
So, when the air conditioning doesn't work, get it out of there. When the heat really is not doing its thing, get it out of there. Like, changing everything in it slowly became a race car. And I was like, damn it. But it was really cool too, because, back then it was like, it was my daily driver. And people were like, you have no interior or full roll cage, a big motor,
This is quite hardcore.
this is your daily driver. You're crazy. And I truly was. And it was fun for a minute. But then that obviously got old. But it became something really, really special. Like, I had one of the best sessions ever with one of my clients that I built a 997 GT3, with cup flares and, competition dampers and a bigger Brembo brake kit and, all the stuff, and it was a great car. But my little 85 G body, he and I sparred this one session where we traded places 5 times. That guy actually went home after. He goes, my day will not get better. He's like, I'm going
Yeah.
home. We had so much fun because it could pull that 3.8 GT3. It could pull it on straightaways and could
Oh
leave on the
wow.
corners. Yeah, it's a 2,300-pound G body with an 8-point roll cage, so the chassis rigidity is there. It's on the same competition three ways that I used to race in American Le Mans Series with. Um, specifically made for a G body. I
Yeah.
work very like exclusively with KW for all of our builds. So it was the first motorsport kit, on a spindle car that they had done. It's on 935 suspension. We've got a 3.6 in there instead of the original 3.2 from RS America. But we built it, and it's got a bunch of GT3 internals, so it makes 360 horsepower and 285 foot-pounds of torque, which is
That's
great on a
enough.
2,300
Yeah.
pound car. And then it's got loads of grip. I mean, Zwart drove it and he's like, I've never driven an air-cooled 911 with this much grip. Like that was a big one. And then Pat Long drove it and he's like, this is a narrow body air-cooled 997 RSR for the street. And I was like, yeah, it is. It really is. All solid everything with the same dampers, and big brake kit. It has to run 18-inch wheels because of the brakes and it has too much, too much in the brake department. But it's a hoot to drive. I've put so many like drift drivers and time attack drivers and some of the old pros in it, and they're like, whoa, like I need a couple days in this thing. And it really is like, by the afternoon, my eyes are bloodshot and I've got arm
Yeah.
pump, I'm like, I'm done. Because
What's it like to drive? Is it quite a physical car to drive?
yeah, with no ABS, no traction control, and no power steering. You become like you wear the car like a glove, which somebody said once, like you become part of this. It's so visceral. But it's still very compliant because I'm big on compliance, but it's very limited movement, with a really good race damper set for street use. There's such a high resolution because they're trying to control the smallest movements. It really makes it quite comfortable without having a lot of movement. I've had it airborne on the freeway going over bridges, and it sets down nice and soft with you know minimal movement. Some bumpy country roads that you can just hammer on, but on track, it's a riot. And I haven't been on track in a long time with it. We just repainted it, we rebuilt the engine, we've rebuilt the transmission. Like it's an all new car, and I'm like, in it. We tried to market it and sell it this past summer, and just the market got soft and it didn't hit the
Yeah.
reserve. And now I'm afraid to drive it because it's got fresh paint. So
Yeah. You've done the stuff. You're like, I kind of never want to. I'm a little bit like this if I'm selling a car. You're like, I'll make it nice, and I kind of never want to see it again because if I see it again too much, I'm going to keep it.
well, and the thing about this car is I've been continuously building it since 2007. And it's like as a business model to continue changing the same car without really people knowing it, it's like it's pointless. But there's always that's one of the fun development cars is to make a G body 911 as quick as some of the modern cars while not crossing over and putting big arrow and making it look like something it's not supposed to be. I really do toe the line, as far as being a little too modern, like 18-inch wheels, but at least they're, mesh BBS E88s. It's got a 991 GT2 RS titanium rear muffler, but going through the bumper, so it's like that's a little new school, but it's tastefully done. And people always really like the exhaust going through the bumper. But it's got hand-shaped flares, literally hammered out. Beautifully. It started with a roof yellowbird front bumper, a composite, replica, but I changed it up pretty drastically. Put a splitter on it, opened the front oil cooler inlet, and made that splitter kind of tuck up the fenders like original, like the Carrera did with that rubber one going up the sides.
Yeah.
Functional. It has fender liners, carbon Kevlar fender liners. We put a 935 oil tank up in the front, so we moved so much weight forward and got it off the rear of the car. And actually, I think it's 46-54 weight distribution.
That seems pretty good.
So it's pretty good. A little bit of a challenge on a trailing arm car because trailing arm, it only has camber gain under compression. It doesn't have, because it's semi trailing arm. It doesn't have toe change. So that's why you see everyone driving those in old videos, and currently they're very loose. So
Yeah.
moving a lot of weight to the front of the car it still is very loose, but it's very manageable with those dampers. It's a riot, and it really just it demands very fast hands, but again, still street drivable. So it's a after all these years and so many variations, and now that it's fresh, we just my wife ran the numbers, and this refresh was like a 200 plus $1,000 refresh. it's a $500,000 build, which some people are like, that's ridiculous. It's like, well, you don't understand what it takes to build something so custom and so special, because even the modern cars, we're putting $250,000 into them, and you started with a $250,000 car or $200,000 car. Look at what those numbers just added up. Why is a singer, $1 million? There it's a lot of stuff that goes into building a custom, piece of artwork. We're not at a million because we're not doing all the fluffy, beautiful. I mean, those cars are artwork, but we're only function. That's it. A few, Alcantara accent, touch
Yeah,
points,
little
on
bits.
door
Yeah.
sills and dashboards. But other than that, like it's just race seats and a roll cage and a few little sprinkles of leather and Alcantara. But other than that, that's how you get 2,300 pounds though too.
Yeah. Have you started lining up the next project car? Are you going to do something more modern, or you're like, nah. When this sells, then we'll think about it.
Yeah, when the car, no, I definitely think about it. Because most of our product line and what we do for our customers, again, like my old car doesn't really bring business, except for it's like people know it's known around the world. So oh my God, Project Nasty. So that does, but the development I put into that car kind of goes, it's a dead end. Um, unless somebody wants to build something like it again someday. That knowledge isn't lost. But we do mostly 991 and 992. So we will do a modern car. Um, and I battle between wanting to do a safari style build because those are
Yeah.
so fun. Like so fun. Everyone says, well, Porsche did it with the Dakar. Well, it's like
Yeah.
saying the 955 Trans Siberia was an off-road monster. No, it was a sticker package.
Yeah.
The Dakar is very beautiful, but it's lifted springs with a hydraulic lift kit and all four corners. There's no protection, and it's low profile tires. That's very different from ours with full Under Armour protection. Even Kevlar used on some of the panels on the bottom side of the car. Running a 29-inch tire, and not rubbing. With
Yeah.
full competition dampers and all spherical. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Now, you start with $100,000 car and you put 250 into it, you're at the price tag of a Dakar, but an actual functional one.
Yeah.
So those are really fun because that is a good daily driver because you don't slow down to do driveway
Yeah.
entrances, and you can just absolutely hammer off road. Like it, I know what I'm capable of building, but when we ran it for the first time, the Turbo S,
Yeah.
it blew my mind. It blew my mind on the street, because it was like, wow, it's almost like a Macan. And
Yeah. Yeah.
off
Yeah.
road, the grip level was insane. But then the photographer, the videographer, was like, "Can we go do some technical stuff?" And I was like, "I didn't really think of it. This isn't one of my Cayennes."
Yeah.
But I was like, "I'll give it a shot." Like I ran over and looked at this steep grade and looked at, all the water had washed everything out. So I'm like, I think I can do this. It a Turbo S with 700 horsepower, or actually 800. It it climbed the hill like my Cayenne in a full overland build. It climbed with the same amount of grip. I was like, wow, it blew my mind. So that would be a lot of fun. But I think what we'll probably do is something like a 991 GTS or even 992 GTS. I really like those because we build so many GT3s and GT3 RSs. Uh, I love sleepers or underdogs. It's always been the underdog story with me in every aspect of my life. And to take a GTS and go to the track, and beat up on the GT3s and hang with the RSs, that will be a lot of fun because that's going to kind of cater to a different not demographic, but a different group set of individuals. You can
The
do this with a
owners. Yeah.
GTS and a Carrera, um, but it's not going to hurt my business with GT3s and GT3 RSs because they're like,
Yeah.
wow, if you can do that with a Carrera, what can you do with my RS?
Yeah.
So we'll probably do something like that. Because it also it requires a bit more development, which I love, and
Yep.
really transforming a car. A lot of people almost expect a GT3 RS or a GT3 to be wicked on track, but it's like, well, they are, and we make them more wicked. But then if you do the same thing with a Carrera, They'll be
Yeah,
like,
I'd be more
whoa,
shocked at like a
right.
seriously legit hand in Carrera than a GT3 because it's a GT3.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's probably what we'll do. When that car sells, just have some fun with it. And then I also intend to not create emotional attachments with my projects anymore.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's the goal anyways.
yeah,
To 17 years on one project is a little too long.
yeah. A little too much, a little too much cash
Yeah.
locked into one thing.
Yeah. So it'll be fun to just keep it fresh, develop content with these builds, move on to the next thing, and continue having fun because that's that's what it's all about. Obviously I have a business to run, but if I'm having fun, my customers are having fun. It's a winning equation.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You're loving life. Right, I'm conscious we're ticking along, so I'm gonna start wrapping it up. So I normally end these with 5 questions. Do you have a most memorable driving trip or journey?
First one, I'm just going straight off with that. Um, it was on the way to Rensport Reunion, which is at Laguna Seca. We are I, I'm always so bad with retaining numbers. I think we're about 6 to 8 hours away from there.
Mm-hmm.
So we road tripped up. It was a group of us, and I was in Nasty, and it took us 12 hours to get there because we zigzagged and did all the fun roads all the way up, which
Nice.
was epic. But towards the end, going into Big Sur, we were on the east side of the mountains, and there you go across a military base and then up over, and this road it's Nacimiento Ferguson or Ferguson Nacimiento, but it seems like a European tarmac rally road to me. I've never been to a tarmac rally. I've only seen videos, but these hairpins where the GT3 Cup is throwing a wheel up in the air, and setting it back down. And so it was myself in my car, and it was Jeff Gameroth from Rothsport. And, he knows how to build engines. He knows how to build cars. And he definitely knows how to wheel a car. We split away from the pack, and it was about a 45-minute drive because this road is not, there's no lines, there's no one coming. Like we just went flat out. We went flat out for, I forget how long. It was like an hour on this drive up the mountain and down the other side. Got out, we were drenched in sweat, and he got out of the car, ran over to me and hugged me, and he was just like, Jojo, that was the best drive. He's like, that will never, like, we likely in our lifetime will never have a drive like that again.
Yeah.
Like it was that good. Cause he was in a 964 mildly built, and I had my little monster, so he was popping into first on these hairpins and just letting it hang out.
Yeah.
And I was sticking my hood inside his door everywhere we went. It's just like, and he was like, you were so tight. It was like we were drifting. I'm like, you were drifting. But it was a riot. That was probably the most memorable. The second most memorable is that one where me and my client, traded places 5 times, because he'd put a wheel in the dirt, I'd put a wheel in the dirt, I'd get loose, we just kept passing, and it was, in a 25-minute session, that's a epic amount of entertainment.
Yeah, that's those moments I've had. It's only a couple. There's only a couple I can think of, and like one that pops to my head of like right car, right friend, right road, right time, and you were just like, right, let's go. And then and that's it. You get to the end, and you're just like in some buzzy state because you know that like this doesn't happen that often.
Yeah. It's you hit the nail on the head. And the other fun part about that one over the mountains with Jeff, we had to wait 40 minutes for the group to catch us. Like we set a big gap.
Yeah.
And it was like had I looked, there was probably rubber flow on the tires. That's how hooked up and how hard we were pushing. At least on mine, anyways. He was sliding it everywhere. So it was a lot of fun.
If you could only drive one sports car for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Your car. 997 GT3 RS.
Yeah. And with a little bit of modifications.
Oh yeah, naturally.
Obviously.
Yeah, definitely upgrade. The dampers on those cars leave a lot to be desired, both in comfort and performance. So dampers and control arms. But other than that, what we also do is like we delete the side mufflers. because that
Oh
center
yeah.
muffler that you have is what it's the desirable one for air cooled guys because it makes great sound and it makes great power and is ultra light. So we just delete the side ones, which is exactly how the cup cars were. They had a high flow cat, um, but even if it's stock cats, running just the macaroni elbows, side muffler deletes, it sounds and makes actually when you do it without valves, it makes 40 horsepower below 4,500 RPM, where it's very usable, and you lose 44 pounds off of the back of the car. So yeah, just suspension upgrades and that it's the best manual, one of the best manuals. The Metzger is absolutely bulletproof, the sublime sound. And, that car was a homologation car, that was, the big brother was the RSR, and that's my old babies.
Yeah, it's a good one. I had someone ask me this week. They're like, "Oh, I've bought a RS. Oh, I think they've got a GT3," and they're like, "Well, I'm thinking of doing some exhaust stuff. I've got a center bypass, got a Sharkworks one. I've had for like forever, and then I have a valve switch, electronic valve switch, to have them open all the time or shut. And the valve switch is the first thing I tell people to do. I'm like, you should do that. Makes good noises. And then depending on how loud you want the car, because how much louder is it? Louder having the side delete, the rear delete, or are they similar, or is one louder than the other? Because I always thought deleting the sides would probably be louder.
It's not, I don't think, because I'm trying to remember the configuration. I don't think it's louder. In some ways, I believe your center muffler is louder, because it's bypassing the sides. That's what it is. It's once the valve is open, you're bypassing the sides. Oh, some of it, because it doesn't fully, close out one. You're breathing through both of them. Um, so we, yeah, full song yours would be louder. But I don't just want sound. I want power and I want weight reduction.
No, I'm with you. I always like I think I just looked at it, it was like the easy option. And then as soon as I'd done that, I was like, well, why would you delete anything else? Because this is loud.
Yeah, no, when people do both, I'm like, and they come here, and I'm like, your setup is dialed based on the numbers that I've saved, but I won't drive your car. They're like, why? Like, because you have a straight exhaust.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason to have a straight exhaust on a GT3 and it's a street car. Well, I
Yeah.
really like it. Yeah, but you're pissing everybody off.
It's
Like,
too
nobody
loud.
likes you.
It's too loud.
You've made your impression. What do
Yeah.
you like at a party? Are you a streaker? Like, is that how you get
Yeah.
attention?
Yeah. I definitely like I've been through a journey, whether it's age, cars, whatever, where you're like younger, louder. Now I'm older, I'm like, not quite so loud. There's a balance, there's a time, because there is something that happens between a certain volume of exhaust and the way you feel how the engine reacts. And if it's not quite loud enough, you don't quite hear it.
Yeah, it's all about the senses. Every aspect of the car. And getting the correct sound is important. And usually sound comes with power, which is also important. That's a lot of fun. But yeah, it's like anything. There's a bell curve. You
Yeah,
know, there's too little, there's good, and
there's,
then there's too much. Right
exactly.
down the other side.
Exactly. What do you think is the most undervalued car at the moment? What should be worth more?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think I'm surprised that the 993s haven't popped more. Because the 964s used to be,
Yeah.
I mean, if you remember, they were so undesirable. And then
Yeah.
everyone started backdating and the numbers skyrocketed. So that one is like a pointlessly overvalued car. um, the 993 hasn't had the same reaction. And the 993 is great, because you have a multi-link suspension. It's not as good as, that was a very short term that they used that
Yeah.
multi-link, then they switched it with the 996 and got it right. The 993 can be frustrating, but it is better, than the semi-trailing arm of the 964 and cars before it. So those I think, and I'm referring to the regular Carrera because obviously the turbos are worth big money and the RSs are worth big money. But some of them, I would say like the used Cayenne market. Some of those
Yeah.
are very, very cheap. Like I don't like the 955s or 957s, but the 958 is what we build up, our overland
What
rigs.
what years are those?
That's
I don't know my Cayennes
2010
like.
or 11 through 18.
Okay, yeah.
So, for us, we had the diesel until 16,
Mm-hmm.
before Dieselgate, which we've built a bunch of diesels, for off-roading, and they're just a riot. And they're going up in price now because, more and more people are realizing like, oh, we don't care about Dieselgate, and this is a fantastic car.
Yeah.
So those, I think they're great. They just, all Cayennes don't really have a great resale, and they're
Yeah.
phenomenal, man. Every model is so fun. It's like, how do you have a off-road vehicle they're rarely used for off-road, let's be
Yeah.
honest, but they are very, very capable off-road and very fun in the mountain twisties. Even with our lifted, and off-road tires, like
Yeah.
I beat up on an M5 coming down out of the mountains once, in my Cayenne diesel with
Yeah.
off-road tires and lifted 2 inches. They're fantastic. So those are a couple of undervalued cars, I think.
Yeah. A friend of mine has just bought it's one of the early ones, an early turbo. It must be 05, 6, 7, somewhere around there. And I'm just waiting. I've been very excited watching him go through this purchase. He's had a new really expensive EV, and it's like broken. So he's like, nah, I'm done losing money on depreciation. Let's do it. Take a gamble and buy an old Cayenne turbo. And I'm very excited to watch it evolve and see how it goes. I think it will just run. I think it will just work.
Yeah. I mean, I think they can be slightly expensive to maintain, but I mean, that's the Porsche way. I mean, you're not buying $100,000 Cayenne turbo. You
Yeah.
probably bought a $20,000 Cayenne
Exactly.
turbo, so it's still going to be expensive to maintain, but still the value's there. Like,
Yeah.
He'll have years of a lot of enjoyment out of that thing.
Yeah. What is the most interesting car to you at the moment? Could be technology, could be Googling, could be, yeah.
Well, that's a good one. I'm not sure. I mean, as the cars get more technologically advanced, they're taking away a lot of the driving experience. So I'm not really big on that. Plus, I hate computers. Like
Yeah.
I don't get along with them. The fact that this is working is fantastic. Thank you for my life. But I like analog things. I like adjusting dampers by hand and not by a laptop.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued by some of these models that are taking away features. Might have. I think maybe there'll be more. I'd love to see Porsche come out with an ultra lightweight 911. With this smaller 3-liter motor.
Yeah.
And maybe they're never going to get rid of ABS and traction control, but everything else, take away from it and try to get the weight down, below 3,000 pounds. That would be
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah, I'm trying to. I haven't driven too many of the new models, and spent any serious time with them. So it'll be interesting to see where the EV world goes. They did a great job with the Taycan, and I think the Taycan was the Sport Turismo is beautiful. But I've driven one and it was pretty nice, but at the same time, the power without vibration and sound is disorienting. So
Yeah.
it makes it cool, but I'm still a petrol, powered car or
Yeah, totally.
diesel powered car person. So that's a tough one to really answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's all right. That was all right. Right. Final question. 5-car garage, unlimited value. It's got to fit into your life. So if you have a sort of daily commute car or whatever, you've got to have one thrown in there.
Oh, wow. 5 cars. Well, there's going to be a Cayenne.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a GT3 RS. Well, let's say I'll do a GT3 RS 997.
Yeah.
997.2. But then I would do a 991 GT3 with a manual.
Oh. Yeah.
So it's 2. Then a Cayenne. That's 3. Now the hypercar, like I still think it would be Carrera GT over 918.
Yeah.
For me. Like that's just that V10. and listening to the recent videos of Jörg at Nürburgring
Yeah.
on modern tires,
Yeah. Oh, that's
and
interesting.
going like much, much quicker. That's awesome. And it's a manual, it's just so cool. So one more, something ridiculous, like a Unimog or something.
Okay. Yeah.
Some tank kind of off-road vehicle that
Just
goes
like
only 50 miles an hour on the freeway.
pick one direction and you just keep going.
Yeah, it's a doomsday car.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.